Brock the Hammer Sterling guffawed loudly on stage at the charity event. "Impossible for a nun to know how to fight," he scoffed, pointing at the religious women. Sister Teresa, 43, walked calmly toward him. What she did in 30 seconds froze the laughter on his face forever. Sister Teresa Miller discreetly adjusted the chairs in the community hall as she watched the increasing number of people arriving for the charity event. At 43, her face carried a serenity that contrasted with the typical hustle and bustle of such preparatory moments. The event had been organized by the nuns of the Sisters of Charity congregation to raise funds for St. Jude's Senior Home, a shelter that welcomed elderly individuals in vulnerable social situations on the outskirts of the city. The hall was simply but lovingly decorated. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, tables were arranged in a semicircle, and a small makeshift stage was set up for the evening's presentations. Sister Teresa had spent the entire week coordinating the preparations, from organizing the refreshments to scheduling the free attractions that would perform to help the cause. Among the special guests for the evening was Brock Sterling, known in the martial arts world as The Hammer, the current middleweight MMA champion. He had been invited through a local businessman who promised that the fighter's presence would help attract more attendees and, consequently, more donations for the home. What the nuns didn't realize was the kind of personality they were welcoming to their event. Brock arrived accompanied by his manager and a few friends, all casually dressed, but he stood out with his arrogant posture and the way he looked around with a sneering smile. He measured approximately 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and muscular arms that evidenced years of intensive training. His short hair and stubble gave him a tough guy look that he made sure to cultivate. As soon as he entered the hall, Brock began making loud comments about the simple decor and how interesting he found it. That people who didn't produce anything tangible for society could organize events to solicit money from others. His friends laughed at his provocations, but the nuns present pretended not to hear, focusing on warmly greeting the other guests. Sister Teresa immediately noticed the negative energy the group brought with them, but decided to maintain her welcoming demeanor. She approached the fighter and his companions with a genuine smile, extending her hand in greeting. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," she said with a sweet but firm voice. "Welcome to our event. We hope you can learn more about the work we do with the seniors in the community." The fighter looked Sister Teresa up and down, scrutinizing her small and seemingly fragile figure. Sister Teresa was approximately 5 feet 5 inches tall, and under her religious habit, her physique appeared delicate. Her brown eyes conveyed kindness, but also a determination that few knew how to recognize. Brock squeezed her hand harder than necessary, as if testing her resilience. "Sure, sister," he replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It'll be interesting to see how you convince people to open their wallets to support those who chose not to do any real work." Sister Teresa maintained her smile, but her eyes showed that she had perfectly understood the disrespectful tone of his provocation. During the initial moments of the event, as people settled in and began to savor the treats prepared by the nuns, Brock continued to make derogatory comments. He loudly questioned the effectiveness of the social work done by the religious women, insinuated that they lived parasitically, and mocked the naivety of those who believed they were doing charity by donating money to the cause. His words echoed through the hall and began to create an uncomfortable atmosphere among those present. Some people were already showing embarrassment, others were starting to question whether they should remain at the event. Sister Teresa observed everything in silence, feeling a growing mix of indignation and compassion in her chest for the man who clearly carried deep wounds in his soul to need to diminish others in that way. The situation escalated when it was time for the official presentations. Sister Mary Claire, the superior of the congregation, went up to the small stage to thank everyone for their presence and explain the importance of the funds being raised. She spoke emotionally about the 47 seniors living at St. Jude's Senior Home, many of them abandoned by their own families, others who had lost their homes because they could no longer afford living costs. As Sister Mary Claire shared touching stories about the residents of the home, Brock began making mocking gestures to his friends, pretending to cry and whispering ironic comments that, although not audible to the entire audience, were clearly perceived by those nearby. His disrespectful attitude began to seriously bother other guests, who cast disapproving glances toward the group. When Sister Mary Claire finished her speech and invited Brock to say a few words as a special guest, the fighter stood up with an expression that mixed amusement and disdain. He walked to the stage with long, confident strides, adjusted the microphone, and looked at the audience as if he were about to tell a joke. "Folks," he began in a loud, clear voice, "it's interesting to be here with you today. You know, I spend my life training, sweating, dedicating myself to being the best at what I do. I wake up at 5 every morning, train until my body aches, because I believe that in life you achieve things with hard work, not by begging for handouts from others." The silence in the hall was awkward. Some people began to shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Others exchanged indignant glances. Brock, however, seemed to be enjoying the reaction he was causing and decided to intensify his provocations. "Now, I look at these ladies here," he continued, pointing directly at the nuns, "and I wonder what kind of contribution they really make to society. They wake up, pray a little, ask others for money and think they're saving the world. Where's the sweat? Where's the real sacrifice? Where's the strength to face real challenges?" Sister Teresa felt her heart pound, but not from nervousness or fear. It was a sensation she hadn't experienced in many years, since before her conversion. Her hands, which were clasped in her lap, began to instinctively close, forming fists that she quickly unfurled, remembering where she was and who she had become. Brock continued his humiliating speech, now addressing the nuns present specifically. "You want to see real strength? You want to see what real dedication means? I challenge any of these holy ladies here to last 10 seconds with me in a ring. I bet they can't even lift a boxing glove, let alone use one." The audience was visibly shocked. Murmurs of indignation began to rise among the guests, and some people stood up as if to leave. Brock's manager tried to discreetly signal him to end his speech, but the fighter was clearly having too much fun to stop. "Incidentally," he continued with a cruel smile, "since we're talking about raising money here, how about an interesting wager? If any of these nuns can land a punch on me that makes me even take a step back, I'll donate $5,000 to your home. But when none of them can, you publicly admit that you're useless and that people should stop supporting freeloaders." The silence that followed was deafening. Sister Mary Claire was pale in the corner of the stage, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. The other guests seemed torn between wanting to leave the event immediately and a morbid curiosity to see how it would unfold. It was then that Sister Teresa slowly rose from her chair. Her movements were calculated and graceful, unhurried, but with a determination that caught everyone's attention in the hall. She walked toward the stage with firm steps, her eyes fixed on Brock's arrogant face, who watched her approach with an expectant smile, clearly expecting her to come up only to apologize or try to calm things down. Few in the hall knew the true story of Sister Teresa Miller. Before dedicating her life to religious service, she had been Teresa Miller, one of the country's most promising Muay Thai fighters. Born into a humble family in a working-class neighborhood on the east side of the city, she discovered martial arts at 15 when she needed to defend herself from a group of boys who were harassing her on her way home from school. Her first contact with Muay Thai happened almost by chance when she passed a small, noisy gym in her neighborhood. The sound of blows on the punching bag and the kiai shouts of the fighters piqued her curiosity. She stood watching through the glass door until the gym's master, a Thai man named Somchai, noticed her presence and invited her in. From the first day of training, Teresa showed an impressive natural aptitude for the Thai martial art. Her movements were fluid, her coordination exceptional, and her ability to learn and execute complex techniques surprised even more experienced fighters. In just 2 years of intensive training, she was already competing in regional tournaments and accumulating victories. At 18, Teresa had become the state Muay Thai champion in her category. At 21, she won the national title and began receiving invitations to fight internationally. Her specialty was high kicks and clinch knees, techniques she executed with surgical precision and devastating force. Experienced opponents surrendered before her speed and refined technique. For almost a decade, Teresa dominated the Brazilian rings and gained international recognition. She accumulated more than 40 professional victories, 32 of which were by knockout. Her income as a fighter allowed her to financially help her family, and even invest in a small business. The future seemed promising and full of possibilities. However, at 29, an event completely changed the course of her life. During an international fight in Thailand, she delivered a knee strike that caused severe injuries to her opponent. The young Thai fighter spent several days hospitalized in critical condition, fighting between life and death. Although the blow had been delivered within the rules of the sport, Teresa was consumed by devastating guilt. She remained at the Thai hospital for 2 weeks, monitoring the recovery of the opponent she had injured. It was during those days of anguish and reflection that she met Sister Anne Marie, a Brazilian missionary who worked with underprivileged children in Bangkok. The nun regularly visited the hospital to offer spiritual comfort to patients and families. Conversations with Sister Anne Marie planted seeds of deep questioning in Teresa's soul. She began to wonder if all her strength and skill could not be directed toward higher purposes than competition and the controlled violence of the rings. When the Thai fighter finally recovered completely, Teresa made a decision that shocked the martial arts world. She announced her immediate retirement from competitions and dedicated herself to a period of spiritual discernment that lasted 3 years. During that time, she volunteered for organizations that served vulnerable people, studied theology, and actively participated in spiritual retreats. Gradually, her religious vocation became clearer and more irresistible. At 32, Teresa entered the Sisters of Charity congregation, taking the religious name Sister Teresa. She took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, dedicating herself completely to the service of the most needy. For over a decade, she worked tirelessly on social projects, specializing in caring for abandoned seniors. Her past as a fighter was rarely mentioned, and very few people in the congregation knew this part of her story. Sister Teresa had kept this chapter of her life as a private treasure, not out of shame, but because she understood that that phase had been fundamental in shaping the strong and compassionate woman she had become. Now at 43, as she walked determinedly toward the stage where Brock awaited her with his sneering smile, all those memories and techniques she thought she had left behind began to awaken in her mind and body, like muscles that had never truly atrophied, merely dormant. Brock the Hammer. Sterling represented everything Teresa had learned to recognize and lament in her old life in the rings. At 28, he was indisputably talented as a fighter, but carried a toxic arrogance that prevented him from understanding the true meaning of strength. His MMA career had been meteoric, accumulating 17 consecutive victories, 15 of them by submission. Born into an affluent family in an affluent suburb outside of a major East Coast city, Brock had never faced true adversity in life. His father was a successful real estate entrepreneur, and his mother a renowned lawyer. Since childhood, he had been pampered and accustomed to having all his desires met without much effort. When he discovered his natural talent for martial arts in his teens, this gift became another tool to feed his already inflated ego. Unlike many fighters who found discipline and personal growth in martial arts, Brock saw combat only as a way to prove his superiority over other human beings. He reveled in the pain he inflicted on his opponents and often prolonged fights unnecessarily to humiliate adversaries who were already clearly defeated. Outside the rings, his personality was even more problematic. Brock often frequented establishments where he knew he would be recognized, provoked unnecessary arguments, and used his reputation as a fighter to intimidate people who couldn't defend themselves. His social media accounts were full of videos where he humiliated store employees, provoked pedestrians on the street, and made derogatory comments about people he considered weak. His personal relationships were equally toxic. Brock had been through several relationships that ended traumatically for his partners, who reported possessive, aggressive, and psychologically abusive behaviors. He saw women as objects to satisfy his ego, not as human beings worthy of respect and consideration. In the martial arts world, although his talent was recognized, many veterans of the sport were repulsed by his attitude. Experienced masters avoided training with him, and several renowned gyms had refused to accept him as a student. Brock had created his own team, composed mainly of young people impressed by his fame and willing to tolerate his behavior in exchange for some recognition. His presence at the nuns' charity event had nothing to do with generosity or a desire to contribute to social causes. Brock had accepted the invitation only because his manager had convinced him that such a public appearance would improve his image with sponsors who were proving reluctant to associate their brands with his name due to several recent controversies. What made his behavior even more despicable was the fact that he knew exactly the effect his words were having. Brock watched with satisfaction the discomfort of the nuns and other guests, feeding on the tension he had created in the environment. For him, it was a kind of entertainment, a display of psychological power over people he considered inferior. When he saw Sister Teresa stand up and walk towards him, Brock felt a wave of anticipated pleasure. He imagined she would go on stage to beg him to stop the provocations, perhaps offer some kind of deal, or try to appeal to his compassion. The idea of publicly humiliating a religious woman in front of that entire audience deeply excited him. What Brock failed to perceive, blinded by his arrogance and lack of perception, were the subtle signs that a more experienced combatant would have noticed immediately. The way Sister Teresa walked did not show nervousness or submission, but rather the controlled confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Her steps were measured, her balance perfect, and her shoulders relaxed in a way that only someone very secure in their physical abilities could demonstrate. Brock was about to discover that his perception of strength and weakness was fundamentally flawed, and that his notion of superiority would be destroyed in a matter of seconds. Sister Teresa ascended the stage with the silent grace of someone completely in control of the situation. Her movements were fluid and calculated, without any sign of hesitation or nervousness. She positioned herself at a respectful distance from Brock, but her body language indicated she was ready for any eventuality that might arise. The fighter watched her with a sneering smile, clearly expecting her to start talking about forgiveness, compassion, or ask him to end his provocations. In his arrogant mind, he had already won this psychological battle before it even began. Brock crossed his arms over his muscular chest and tilted his head slightly, in a posture that conveyed both contempt and amusement. "Mr. Sterling," Sister Teresa began with a calm and serene voice, "I accept your challenge." The simplicity and firmness with which she uttered these words caused an immediate silence in the hall. Even Brock seemed momentarily surprised, not expecting a nun to actually accept his ridiculous provocation. The audience was completely stunned. Murmurs of concern and disbelief began to rise among the guests. Some people stood up from their chairs, clearly uncomfortable with the turn the situation was taking. Sister Mary Claire tried to go up to the stage to intervene, but Sister Teresa made a discreet gesture with her hand, indicating that everything was under control. Brock quickly regained his arrogant composure and let out a loud, exaggerated laugh. "Sister," he said, still laughing, "I hope you're sure about what you're doing. I'm not going to go easy just because you're wearing this little religious outfit. If you really want to make a fool of yourself in front of everyone, that's your problem." Sister Teresa maintained a serene expression, but her eyes shone with an intensity that few could correctly interpret. She was making mental calculations, analyzing the opponent's posture, balance, and weak points before her. Her experience as a professional fighter had instantly returned, as if it had never truly left her soul. "I perfectly understand the consequences of my decision," she replied with absolute tranquility. "But before we begin, I'd like to set some conditions. First, when I win, in addition to the $5,000 you promised to donate, you will publicly apologize to all the nuns present and to all the guests you offended today." The audacity of the statement caused a new wave of murmurs in the audience. Brock laughed even louder, shaking his head as if he had heard the most ridiculous thing in his life. "When you win? Sister, are you sure you haven't hit your head? All right, I accept your conditions. And when I win, besides you admitting you're useless, I want you to close this charade of a shelter and stop misleading good-hearted people." Sister Teresa nodded calmly, as if merely agreeing to a simple business arrangement. She began to move slowly across the stage, seemingly walking without specific direction, but in reality, she was testing the available space and calculating angles of attack. Brock, interpreting her movements as nervousness, decided to intensify the psychological pressure. "Look, folks," he shouted to the audience, "our holy warrior is getting nervous. Maybe it's best to give up now, sister, before you seriously hurt yourself. I've broken the ribs, noses, and arms of guys much bigger and stronger than you. It was at that moment that Sister Teresa stopped moving and positioned herself directly in front of Brock. She was approximately 6 feet away, a position that for most people would seem safe, but for an experienced Muay Thai fighter, it represented the perfect distance for an explosive attack. "Mr. Sterling," she said with a sweet but firm voice, "before we begin, I'd like to say one thing. For many years of my life before I became religious, I practiced martial arts. I learned that true strength does not come from muscles or the ability to inflict pain on others. True strength comes from discipline, respect, and humility." Brock rolled his eyes and assumed a relaxed fighting stance, clearly not taking his opponent seriously. "All right, sister, enough with the sermon. Let's get this over with so I can leave this depressing place." What happened in the next 30 seconds would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. Sister Teresa, in a movement so fluid it seemed almost supernatural, took 2 quick lateral steps to the right, positioning herself at an angle Brock had not anticipated. Her movement was silent and precise, her feet barely making a sound against the stage floor. Brock, overly confident in his own superiority, tried to follow the nun's lateral movement with a lazy body rotation. It was precisely at this moment of transition, when his weight was poorly distributed and his guard was down, that Sister Teresa executed the sequence of movements she had practiced thousands of times during her years as a champion. First, she delivered a devastating low kick to Brock's support leg, a blow executed with the precision of a watchmaker and the force of a pneumatic hammer. The impact was dry and direct, hitting exactly the sciatic nerve point that would cause intense pain and immediate imbalance. Brock felt an electric jolt run through his entire right leg, and his balance dangerously wavered. Before the fighter could fully process what had happened or try to recover, Sister Teresa had already advanced with her second technique. She closed in with impressive speed, applying a Thai clinch that grabbed Brock's head and neck in a position he couldn't defend due to the imbalance caused by the previous kick. With Brock trapped in her favorite combat position, Sister Teresa delivered a precise knee strike that stopped inches from his face, demonstrating absolute control over her strength and the situation. The message was clear. She could have caused serious damage if she wished, but she chose to demonstrate mercy and control. The final blow of the sequence was an impeccable throw that used Brock's own weight and momentum against him. Sister Teresa used a judo technique she had learned during her supplementary training, applying a sweep that sent the fighter to the stage floor with a dry thud that echoed through the entire hall. Brock landed on his back, completely stunned and breathless. His eyes were wide with shock and disbelief, trying to process how a seemingly fragile nun had managed to take him down so easily. The arrogant smile had completely disappeared from his face, replaced by an expression of total confusion and deep humiliation. The audience was in absolute silence, as if everyone was witnessing something their minds couldn't yet fully comprehend. Some people had their mouths open in shock, others blinked repeatedly as if trying to wake from a surreal dream. Brock's manager was pale and clearly trying to figure out how he would explain the situation to the press. Sister Teresa, for her part, remained standing beside the fallen Brock, but her expression showed no triumph or satisfaction at the victory. Instead, her face reflected genuine compassion and concern for the man she had just defeated. She knelt delicately beside the fighter and extended her hand in a gesture of help and reconciliation. "Mr. Sterling," she said in a soft, maternal voice, "I hope you're not hurt. It wasn't my intention to cause any physical harm, only to demonstrate that we all have far more potential than we imagine, and that judging people by their appearances is always a dangerous mistake." Brock looked at the nun's outstretched hand, still trying to process what had happened. His mind, accustomed to being the predator in all situations, was struggling to accept that he had been defeated by someone he considered completely harmless. The psychological impact of the defeat was much greater than any physical discomfort he might have been feeling. "Please," Sister Teresa continued with infinite patience, "let me help you up. We all make mistakes, and we all deserve a second chance to show the best that exists within us." The kindness in her voice and the sincerity in her eyes began to touch a part of Brock's soul that had remained dormant for years. For the first time in a long time, he found himself before someone who had demonstrated absolute power over him, but who chose to use that power only to offer compassion and an opportunity for growth. After a few seconds of hesitation, Brock finally accepted Sister Teresa's outstretched hand and allowed her to help him up. The simple gesture carried a deep symbolism that did not go unnoticed by those present. Here was a man who had spent the entire evening humiliating and diminishing others, being kindly helped by one of the women he had most disrespected. When Brock finally stood up, he found himself face to face with Sister Teresa. But now the dynamic between them had completely changed. The fighter could no longer maintain direct eye contact with her, feeling genuinely ashamed for the first time in many years. His characteristic arrogance had been replaced by a vulnerability he didn't know how to handle. Sister Teresa observed the transformation happening before her eyes and decided to take advantage of that moment of emotional openness to plant seeds of reflection in the young fighter's soul. "Mr. Sterling," she said with a sweet but firm voice, "I want you to know that I have no resentment for what happened here today. In fact, I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me to remember that our inner strength never truly abandons us. It merely awaits the right moment to manifest." Brock slowly raised his eyes to meet the nun's serene gaze. He expected to see triumph or satisfaction in her expression, but found only genuine compassion and a maternal concern that deeply touched him. "How did you manage to do that?" he asked in a choked voice, still trying to process his sudden and absolute defeat. "For 12 years of my life before I became religious, I was a professional Muay Thai fighter," Sister Teresa explained without any ostentation. "I won several titles and learned a lot about physical strength during that period, but I also learned something much more important, that true strength is not in our ability to defeat others, but in our ability to lift up those who have fallen." The revelation caused a new wave of murmurs in the audience. Now everything made sense to those present, but for Brock, the information was devastating on a completely different level. He had built his entire identity around the idea that he was superior to others because of his fighting skills, and discovering that he had been defeated by someone who had voluntarily abandoned that world for something she considered more important was destroying his fundamental concepts about personal worth and purpose in life. "But why did you stop fighting?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You were good at it, probably better than me. Why give up something you were so talented at?" Sister Teresa smiled softly before answering. "I didn't give up, Mr. Sterling. I merely redirected my strength to different battles. Today, I fight against the hunger of the seniors in our home, against the abandonment they face, against the despair that sometimes takes hold of their hearts. That is a much harder and far more rewarding fight than any combat I ever faced in a ring." The nun's words echoed in Brock's heart in a way he had never experienced before. For the first time in his adult life, he was seriously questioning his priorities and motivations. The idea that there were higher purposes than the constant pursuit of domination over other human beings was completely new to him. Sister Teresa perceived that she had created a genuine opening in the young man's soul and decided to take advantage of that moment to offer something even more valuable than a lesson in humility. "Mr. Sterling," she said, gently placing her hand on his shoulder, "I would like to extend an invitation. If you're interested, you would be very welcome to visit our home and see the work we do there. Perhaps you'll discover that your skills and energy can be channeled toward purposes that bring true joy to your life." Brock felt tears forming in his eyes, an emotional reaction he hadn't experienced since childhood. The nun's unconditional kindness was melting layers and layers of bitterness and arrogance he had accumulated over the years. "I don't know if I deserve this opportunity," he replied in a trembling voice. Sister Teresa gently held both of Brock's hands in hers, a maternal gesture that deeply touched him. "We all deserve opportunities for growth and redemption," she said with absolute conviction. "What happened here today doesn't define who you are, but rather who you can choose to become from now on." The fighter looked around the hall and realized that the entire audience was watching them in respectful silence. Some people had tears in their eyes, moved by the transformation they were witnessing. Brock realized that a unique opportunity lay before him. He could choose to maintain his defensive and arrogant posture, or he could have the courage to admit his mistakes and seek a better path. Taking a deep breath and fighting against years of conditioning that taught him never to show weakness, Brock turned to the audience. His voice was initially trembling, but gained strength as he found words to express feelings he had suppressed for so long. "Folks," he began with difficulty, "I came here today thinking I was superior to all of you. I mocked the sisters' work, disrespected their cause, and behaved like a complete idiot. I was wrong, completely wrong, and I offer my sincere apologies to everyone I offended." The words flowed more easily now, as if an emotional dam had broken within him. "Especially to the sisters present," he continued, looking directly at the religious women, "I ask for profound forgiveness. You dedicate your lives to caring for people whom society often forgets, and I didn't have the maturity to recognize and respect that dedication." Sister Mary Claire, who had remained in shock throughout the episode, slowly approached the stage. Her face reflected a mixture of relief and genuine emotion. "Mr. Sterling," she said in a sweet voice, "we all make mistakes. What matters is our willingness to learn and grow from them. You are very welcome in our community whenever you wish." Brock then turned to Sister Teresa, who had remained by his side throughout his public declaration. "Sister Teresa," he said with a voice full of emotion, "I would very much like to accept your invitation to visit the home, but before that, I want to fulfill my promise. The $5,000 I promised to donate are here, and I want to double that amount. $10,000 for St. Jude's Senior Home." The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, not only for Brock's financial generosity, but primarily for the genuine transformation they had witnessed. People who moments before had been embarrassed and indignant at his behavior now watched him with respect and admiration for his courage in admitting his mistakes publicly. Sister Teresa embraced Brock in a maternal way, a gesture that symbolized unconditional acceptance and forgiveness. "I am very proud of the man you have become," she whispered in his ear. "Admitting our mistakes and seeking change is one of the greatest demonstrations of strength that exists." For the remainder of the event, the atmosphere was completely transformed. Brock remained in the hall, this time genuinely interested in learning about the work done by the nuns. He spoke with several guests, personally apologizing to those he had offended and showing sincere interest in understanding how he could contribute positively to social causes. When it was time for the nuns to present details about the operation of St. Jude's Senior Home, Brock listened attentively to every word. He asked intelligent questions about the needs of the seniors, about the challenges faced by the institution, and about practical ways to help beyond financial contributions. At the end of the night, when the event was concluding and guests began to say goodbye, Brock approached Sister Teresa again. "Sister," he said with evident sincerity in every word, "I want you to know that you changed my life today. I don't know exactly how, but I feel like I'm a different person now." Sister Teresa smiled tenderly and replied, "The change was always within you, Brock. I merely helped bring it out from the shadows into the light. Now the real work begins, transforming this new perspective into concrete actions that benefit other people." Brock nodded with renewed determination. He knew that his journey of personal transformation was just beginning, but for the first time in years, he felt he was walking in the right direction. In the weeks that followed the charity event, Brock kept his word and began regularly visiting St. Jude's Senior Home. His first visit was marked by nervousness and uncertainty about how he would be received, but the nuns and the senior residents welcomed him with the same kindness they showed to all visitors. During his first days at the home, Brock limited himself to observing and learning about the institution's routine. He accompanied the sisters during their daily activities, from preparing meals to recreation moments with the residents. What impressed him most was the tireless dedication of the religious women, who worked long hours without any expectation of recognition or material reward. Sister Teresa became his main mentor during this period of adaptation. She guided him through the home's facilities, explained the specific needs of each senior, and helped him understand how his energy and enthusiasm could be channeled into constructive activities. Gradually, Brock began to actively participate in daily tasks. His physical strength, which he once used only to dominate opponents, was now employed to help seniors with reduced mobility move around. to carry heavy supplies, and to perform maintenance repairs on the home's facilities. He discovered that there was a deep satisfaction in using his abilities to make life easier for people who truly needed help. One of the most transformative experiences for Brock was meeting Mr. Walter, an 82-year-old retired factory worker who had been abandoned by his family after suffering a stroke that limited his movements. The senior was known for his difficult personality and for resisting most attempts at approach by caregivers. Initially, Mr. Walter showed distrust toward Brock, questioning his motivations and doubting the sincerity of his interest in helping. However, as the days passed and Brock continued to visit regularly, dedicating time to talk with him about his past life and listening to his stories with genuine interest, an improbable friendship began to flourish. Mr. Walter had been a strong and independent man throughout his life, and the forced dependency due to age and illness had created a deep bitterness in him. Brock, who was beginning to understand the dangers of arrogance and excessive pride, managed to establish a special connection with the senior, sharing his own struggles with issues of identity and purpose. During one of their conversations, Mr. Walter revealed that his biggest regret was having alienated his children due to wounded pride after a family argument years ago. He had been too stubborn to take the first step toward reconciliation and now felt forgotten and abandoned. Brock recognized similar patterns in his own life and decided to help the senior find a way to reconnect with his family. With Sister Teresa's help, Brock managed to locate Mr. Walter's children and mediate an initial phone call. The conversation was emotional and full of tears from both sides, with mutual requests for forgiveness and promises to rebuild the family ties that had been lost due to pride and lack of communication. The in-person reunion between Mr. Walter and his children happened at the home itself, on a Sunday afternoon that remained forever etched in the memory of all present. Brock accompanied every moment of the reconciliation, feeling a joy and satisfaction he had never experienced in any of his victories in the rings. This episode marked a definitive turning point in Brock's personal transformation. He finally understood that true strength lay in his ability to build bridges between people, to facilitate emotional healing, and to use his skills to create moments of happiness in the lives of other human beings. In parallel with his work at the home, Brock also began to reevaluate his career as a professional fighter. He still maintained his passion for martial arts, but now understood that he could use his experience and knowledge for higher purposes than the simple pursuit of victories and personal recognition. With Sister Teresa's support and guidance, Brock developed the idea of creating a martial arts program for at-risk youth. His goal was to teach not only fighting techniques, but primarily values such as discipline, respect, self-control, and teamwork. 6 months after that transformative night at the charity event, Brock had become a completely different person. His schedule was now divided between sports training, volunteer work at St. Jude's Senior Home, and the development of his social project with at-risk youth. The arrogance that once defined his personality had been replaced by genuine humility and a sense of purpose he never imagined could exist. The martial arts program Brock created in partnership with the Sisters Congregation became a surprising success. Dozens of young people from the city's underprivileged areas signed up for the free classes, initially attracted by the opportunity to learn from a professional champion, but staying due to the values and teachings that transcended fighting techniques. Sister Teresa frequently visited Brock's training sessions, observing with maternal satisfaction how he had developed the ability to transmit knowledge in a respectful and inspiring way. She saw him teaching young people about the importance of self-control, how to channel anger constructively, and the value of teamwork. It was gratifying to witness how someone who had been consumed by arrogance now dedicated so much effort to uplifting others. Brock's transformation also positively impacted his professional MMA career. Although he continued to compete, his approach to training and fights had changed dramatically. He became known for his respectful attitude toward opponents, humility in victories, and graciousness in defeats. Sponsors who once avoided associating their brands with his name now lined up to support him, attracted not only by his skills, but primarily by his new public image. During a television interview about his personal transformation, Brock was asked about the specific moment that had changed his life. he responded with visible emotion. It was when a nun taught me that true strength is not in knocking others down, but in helping them get back up. Sister Teresa showed me that I was wasting my potential by using my abilities only to feed my ego. The interview went viral on social media, inspiring thousands of people who were facing their own battles with pride, anger, and lack of purpose. Brock began receiving messages from young fighters asking for advice on how to balance athletic ambition with social responsibility, and he always responded by directing them to the example of Sister Teresa and the other religious women who dedicated their lives to serving the needy. On the first anniversary of the charity event, the nuns organized a new celebration to raise funds for an expansion of St. Jude's Senior Home. Brock not only participated as a special guest, but also brought several of his students from the social project to present a martial arts demonstration focused on discipline and respect. During his speech at the celebration, Brock publicly shared some of the most valuable lessons he had learned during that year of transformation. "I thought I knew the meaning of the word strength," he said emotionally to the audience. "I measured my strength by my ability to cause pain and fear in other people. Today I know that wasn't strength, it was weakness disguised as power." He continued, "True strength is in Sister Teresa's hands when she feeds a senior who can no longer eat alone. It's in Sister Mary Claire's patience when she spends hours talking with someone who feels abandoned. It's in the dedication of all these women who chose to live to serve others, expecting nothing in return." Sister Teresa, who was in the audience, felt tears of joy streaming down her face. Seeing Brock's complete transformation confirmed her fundamental belief that every person carries within themselves the potential for good, regardless of how lost they may initially seem. At the end of the celebration, when the guests had already departed, Brock remained to help with the cleanup and organization of the hall, exactly as he did after every event at the home. As he stacked chairs, he reflected on the extraordinary journey he had traveled since that first humiliating night that became the most important blessing of his life. Sister Teresa approached him as they finished organizing the space. "I am very proud of the man you have become, Brock," she said with maternal affection. "You proved that true victory doesn't happen in rings, but in the hearts we managed to touch and the lives we managed to transform." Brock embraced Sister Teresa with infinite gratitude, finally understanding that that night of apparent humiliation had in fact been the most precious gift he had ever received. He had lost a fight but gained a new life. He had been physically defeated but spiritually victorious. Today, 3 years later, Brock Sterling is known not only as a respectful and inspiring MMA champion, but primarily as an agent of social transformation. His martial arts program has already served hundreds of young people, many of whom found in the lessons of discipline and respect an alternative to violence and crime. Sister Teresa continues her quiet work at St. Jude's Senior Home, knowing that her true strength manifests not in the blows she can deliver, but in her ability to touch hearts and transform lives. She taught all of us that sometimes it's necessary to knock someone down to truly help them get back up. True strength always comes with love, compassion, and humility. And